The conference room felt like a bowl of glass and light. A model city spun beneath spotlights on the table, its tiny streets laid out like a promise. Investors sat like judges. Cameras blinked like small, patient eyes. Ricardo Mendonça stood at the head, a man whose suit had learned the shape of authority. He looked at the polished model, then at the man presenting it, Tulio, hands steady, smile rehearsed. The room held its breath. Ricardo slammed his palm on the table. The sound cut the hush in two. "Bring me the real designer," he demanded. The words landed like a decree. Heads turned. Tulio's face flickered, a practiced composure unraveling for a beat. Laughter, small and cruel, traveled the back rows, aimed at a figure slumped against the wall. A boy no older than a teenager, his clothes frayed, his hair thin from wind and city nights. No one expected him to move. He raised his hand. If this moment is already pulling you in, pause and hit subscribe. There's more to come. The room changed temperature when the hand went up. Where before there had been amusement, now there was a ripple of curiosity and annoyance. Some leaned forward, jaws set. Some smiled as if at a joke. The boy's fingers were ink-stained and clumsy from cold. He kept them raised as if they were anchors. That boy was Mateus. Mateus had learned the city by touch. He could map a block by the angle of a stoop, the particular way rain pooled against a loading dock, the smell of fryer oil that drifted from the corner bakery at dawn. He had no address, but he had an archive. Pieces of paper folded once, scraps of cardboard scored with a pen, a shoebox of tiny buildings patched together with tape. He made models not because he wanted to be seen, but because making kept him steady. When everything else was weather and hunger, constructing a little house out of discarded materials felt like building a place that could not be taken from him. Dona Luzia noticed him months before the meeting. She worked in the lobby of the firm, coffee runs, mail sorting, the quiet, practical person everyone trusted. She carried a kettle and a thrift store sweater, and the kind of voice that could stop a crying child without telling them what to do. When she found Mateus sketching beneath the marble staircase, she did something small and enormous. She offered him a sandwich and the permission to stay long enough to watch. He watched. He watched architects unfold plans like maps of possibility, watched how they measured light, how they argued the right angle for a window. He learned by folding paper into space, by watching shadows move across model rooftops in the evening. He scavenged. He stole nothing that didn't clamor to be rescued. Strips of foam, a bent ruler, a torn cafe menu that became a facade. He transformed trash into ideas that fit people, benches that invited rather than ignored, shelters that captured sunlight. His work had a kindness built into its joints. It was small-scale, human in a way the glossy portfolios were not. Tulio found one of those pieces in an empty back room. He told himself it was inspiration. He photographed the maquette, took the lines and reinterpreted them with software and a team. He smoothed the rough edges, substituted bespoke textures, added a corporate gloss. He presented the final render as his own. The investors loved it. The firm cheered. Tulio rose. The elevator felt kinder to him than to those who had stayed behind. Mateus continued to be invisible. Months later, that same work, now immaculate and marketed, hung on a screen in Ricardo's boardroom. The model rotated like a polished promise. The investors nodded as if the plan had always looked this way. But Ricardo, who had made a career of spotting the work behind the work, did not look satisfied. He had the bluntness of someone used to having to cut through noise. "Who is the real designer?" he asked. He didn't want a rehearsed voice. He wanted truth. No one answered. That's when Mateus raised his hand. At first there were whispers. Someone laughed. A woman near the back leaned over and muttered, "He's been in the lobby before." Tulio's eyes dropped to the boy, and then darted away, suddenly small. A camera moved toward the kid as if approaching an exhibit. Mateus's face was calm, which in a place like that read as either madness or unflappable resolve. He opened his backpack. The bag exhaled dust and the faint tang of metal and old glue. He set it on the conference table like it belonged there. He took out a shoebox. Inside were things that did not match the room. Paper with uneven lines, pencil strokes that knew the mass of a roof, tiny walls glued from cigar boxes, a map cut from a supermarket flyer showing where people actually walked and where they sat. He set down a little block of cardboard that, under the bright lights, looked like a claim. Mateus then laid out his proof. A torn sketchbook with dates, notes about light and wind scribbled in the margins, a series of small models showing variations, each a thought tested. He showed the stains from rain, the places where he'd patched a cracked bit with tape because he had to move the model from an underpass to the bakery window to keep it dry overnight. He spoke about users as if naming them made their needs real. Elderly neighbors who needed steps with places to rest, young moms who needed shaded kiosks where kids could wait. He did not beg. He explained. The room's laughter died like a flame smothered. Tongues in mouths tasted the texture of guilt. Tullio shifted and could not meet Mateus's eyes. One of the investors, older and usually impatient, said, "Where did you learn to draw like that?" Mateus shrugged and said softly, "I learned by watching, by making what I needed." Ricardo's face was unreadable for a beat. Then his posture changed. He had wanted the truth thrown into the open, and here it was, scraps made into evidence, earnest and undeniable. He had power in that room, contracts, budgets, the ability to make one life tilt. He also had the responsibility to choose justice in a way that didn't humiliate or heroicize a boy whose work came from necessity. "Why didn't you speak up earlier?" Ricardo asked. Mateus's voice was clear. "I spoke when I could. They didn't listen." He looked at Tullio. "I want the chance to study. Not a check, not a job fixed for me today. A program, scholarship, internship space, and places for others like me. Teach us the tools. Give us a foundation." That refusal of charity reshaped the room's understanding. He was not asking to be rescued. He was asking to be equipped. He wanted to build with his hands and to teach others to do the same. He wanted systemic opportunity more than a single favor. Ricardo sat back. The investors exchanged glances. Some were already calculating public perception. The cameras recorded, and the firm's PR team must have smelled a story. Ricardo's reply balanced on that thin blade where fairness meets consequence. He stood, walked to the table, and leaned in. "This firm will fund a pilot program," he said. "A division of community design, real seats for young people with the talent you've shown, and mentorship led by professionals. We will also audit this project's authorship." He turned to Tullio. "You will be suspended pending review." The words landed like judgment, not as spectacle, but as formal consequence. Ricardo's voice softened as he added, "And Donna Lucia will be on the team. She knows where to find people who need this." The firmness of his decision made room for immediate, meaningful repair. It wasn't charity, it was structural change. Mateus accepted the offer, but on his terms. He signed no paper on camera. He asked only that the program be run transparently, and that spots be reserved not for show, but for those who had been left out. He was careful with his newly visible voice. He refused the cushy title they tried to give him on the spot. He wanted education and a seat at a table where he could learn to make his language legible to others. Tullio left the room with his head bowed. He had benefited from an unearned ascent, and the fall was not theatrical but necessary. He would face consequences, and more importantly, the work of understanding how he had smoothed over someone else's edges for his own gain. The firm promoted Donna Lucia, not as a token but because she had been the bridge between a hidden talent and the resources to nurture it. Her promotion read as recognition of the quiet labor that often goes unseen. Years passed in ways that don't show on a news cycle, but show on hands and drawings. Mateus went to night classes, then to formal architectural training supported by the scholarship Ricardo's firm funded. He learned the technical language, how to calculate loads, how to plan for plumbing, how to draft a permit. He also held fast to what had always guided him, designing for the people you meet on the street, not for the glossy magazine. He built prototypes in community workshops, teaching kids to make models from boxes and wire. The program grew. Other firms contributed. It became an apprenticeship hub, not a PR stunt. Mateus's projects were modest in scale, but enormous in impact. He designed shared housing blocks where corridors doubled as places to meet neighbors, and laundry turned into communal ritual. He proposed microparks that fit in the spaces between buildings, places with sunlight and benches designed for people to rest without being shushed. He repaired a shelter's layout so mothers could watch children play from kitchen counters, and he convinced city councils to pilot a retrofit program that gave formerly neglected blocks access to daylight and drainage. Nothing was overnight. Success accumulated in years of meetings, missteps, and redesigns. He learned to translate the messy poetry of his early models into permitting documents and budget proposals. His old shoebox models became the seed of a curriculum that taught design as dignity, not decoration. Ricardo's division, renamed and reshaped, continued to fund apprenticeships. Donated materials were organized, mentors paired with learners, and a small studio opened near the firm's headquarters. The firm lived with the memory of its mistake and the ongoing labor of reparation. Tullio, after the suspension, took courses in ethics and restitution. He taught, awkwardly at first, the technical skills he had once used to appropriate a vision. His redemption was neither easy nor complete, but it was real work rather than denial. Mateus moved into a small room above a workshop. He had a proper bed and a window that let in honest light. He kept one of the original little models on a shelf, the one that had started it all. It smelled faintly of old glue and night air. He did not forget what came before. When he stood at ribbon cuttings, he spoke as someone who had once slept near a bakery window and had to hustle to keep a model dry. He taught students to listen, really listen, to the people who would live in their designs. He insisted that a design should never be something that made people feel smaller in their own streets. The city changed in small ways: a park with accessible paths, a cluster of modular units that could be adapted to different family sizes, kiosks where vendors from the neighborhood could work without getting pushed to the edges. These were not monuments, but seams that mended how people moved through the city. Where architecture once prioritized spectacle, these interventions prioritized habitability and warmth. They were not perfect solutions, and Mateus never promised that they were. He promised steady work and an insistence that those who had been excluded be invited to the table. At a community celebration years later, a man from the firm, older now, a little softer around the edges, told the story of the day in the conference room. He said the words again, not as a dramatic flourish, but as a reminder: "Bring me the real designer." That command had been a rupture and a chance. The crowd laughed, not cruelly but with the kind of affection you save for someone who has earned their place. The final image is simple. A child in the crowd points to Mateus and asks, "Did you make that?" Mateus kneels and hands the child a scrap of cardboard and a pencil. "Build something for someone," he says. Design is not just for the galleries. It's for the people who live here. Genius sometimes answers to necessity. The same hands that keep a model dry in an underpass can one day draft plans that shelter a family. Recognition matters, not as a gift, but as a right. What began with a shoebox and a willingness to be seen became a program, a class, a livelihood for many. The firm learned that justice is not only punitive, it is corrective and generous in structure. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that talent can be invisible until someone chooses to look. Tell us in the comments about a time you saw someone's work and recognized them. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to hear more stories about people whose creations quietly change the world.